Hi everyone, and it's Kate here, wrapping up over 50 books for you. So, as you know, I have not really been doing many wrap-ups this year, just due to health issues. And today is a good energy day, and I thought, you know what? Today's a day I feel like wrapping up over 50 books. So we're gonna go through these books. I'm going to try to be brief, maybe touch on ones that were phenomenal more, and ones that were just 3-star, maybe not as much. The first book is Rabbit Hill by Robert Lawson. This is a children's book that came out in the 50s. It won the Newbery Award, and it's about the little animals in this yard and all of their apprehensions and misgivings about a new family that's moving in. And they don't know if this family will grow a garden and if they'll share any of the, produce that they grow. And it was a really endearing little novel. I read it aloud to Peter. We both thoroughly enjoyed it. It has really wonderful pictures, and I really enjoyed this a lot. So I definitely highly recommend it, especially as a read aloud. Then the next one was a buddy read with Kate from the novel Nomad, and that was The Snake, the Crocodile, and the Dog by Elizabeth Peters. This is the 7th in the Amelia Peabody series, and we both really enjoyed this. We love the Amelia Peabody series. We love the Egyptian setting, and it's just a really fun detective series. Next is All of a Kind Family by Sydney Taylor. This is the first in a series of 5 books about a Jewish family living in Brooklyn, New York, and then eventually they move, but it starts out in Brooklyn, and it's early 1900s, and it's just a really, really fabulous series. There's 5 sisters and then 1 little brother later on in the series, and it's just so well told, so many funny anecdotes that seems like things children would really do, and it's neat to see the sisters grow as you continue on in the series. Then next I read Agatha Raisin and the Love from Hell, the 11th in the Agatha Raisin series, and some relationship dynamics really changed for Agatha in this one. I really like this series. If you like cozies and kind of sardonic, more sardonic type sleuths, I think you'll really enjoy the series. I highly recommend it. Next was The Tale of Despereaux by Kate DiCamillo, and I definitely enjoyed this one. I listened to the audiobook with Peter, and we both really liked it. I think it's not my favorite Kate DiCamillo, but it was definitely a really enjoyable read about this mouse, Despereaux, and the adventures he has in this castle. And it just had a really fun, whimsical feel about it, and I really loved the love of story that's in it. Next is the first 4 in the Betsy Tacy books. So Betsy, Tacy and Tib, Betsy and Tacy go over the big hill, and Betsy and Tacy go downtown. Now, these were the first 4 books that the read-along, the Betsy Tacy 2019 read-along that Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading and Katie from Life Between Words and myself are hosting. We read 2 in January and 2 in February. And this is one of my absolute favorite series out there. I love it so much. I was a little bit worried that I wasn't going to enjoy the early books that much, but I really did enjoy them. I love the kind of it's just such a rich series. There's lots of little details to make this town come alive, and I love getting to know the different characters, and I appreciate the simplicity about these 4 books more than I thought I was going to. So I'm absolutely loving going through that series this year. Then another Susanna Kearsley that I read, and Robin from Driftless Reader and I are going through this year and reading a Susanna Kearsley basically every month, with a couple exceptions, but it's been so fun reading with her, and we're just absolutely loving it. And our pick for January was The Winter Sea, or for February was The Winter Sea. And this one was, I just love all of her books so much. I just want to refresh myself on the names and things before I give you them. Yeah, that's what it is. It involves the Jacobite Rebellion. It's set in 1708, and there's in the Slains Castle. And this was a romance that I particularly enjoyed. The storyline from the past. I enjoyed that romance a lot. So I go back and forth between different books over whether I like the storyline from the past or the storyline from the present more, or the romance more. And in this one, I really loved the romance. It might be one of my favorite ones. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. Then a really unexpected gem that I found was Cinders, The Untold Story of Cinderella by Finley Aaron. And this one, what I'm doing for my Cinderella Chronicles project, and I will talk about that more when I get around to doing a Cinderella Chronicles video talking about the novelizations that I had read. But I really, really liked it. So I'm definitely looking forward to talking about it in a video in more detail. Then I read The Cricket in Times Square. This is another Newbery winner. This one was adequate, but I would have enjoyed it more, I think, had I read it for the first time as a child. I just didn't find myself that emotionally engaged with it, and that's something that I really look for in books, but it was definitely a fun children's story, and I read it aloud to Peter, and he really, really liked it. So he enjoyed it, I think, more than I did. Then a book that I did not like was The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry by Rachel Joyce. This is, there have been so many cases of, you know, booktube hype, and then I read it and it doesn't live up to it. And this is one of those cases. I thought there was so much emotional trauma I had to go through to get through this book. And then at the end, it didn't feel worth it at all. Like I felt cheated and manipulated as a reader. So I do not feel positive about that book at all. Next was The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart by Holly Ringland. I read this with Natalie from my reading days, and we both loved this book. It was just a stunning, stunning book. And it's about Alice Hart, who has some traumatic experiences as a child and ends up going to live at a flower farm eventually and really finds healing through that, through flowers and wildlife. And it was just really beautifully written. I found the characters to be really vivid, and it's really stayed with me very well, and I've really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. Then there was the beginning of the middle grade March reads. And so first was Sweep, The Story of a Girl and Her Monster by Johnathan Auxier. I'm not sure how you say his last name. And I highly, highly recommend this one. I gave it 5 stars. It was such a wonderful middle grade book. It had heart. It had a really interesting story. It had a whimsical feel to it. I think if you like Charles Dickens, you could enjoy this book. And it's just about this girl who's a chimney sweep, which there were some parts about it that were really sobering, but then I thought it was neat that it felt very true to life. And so you kind of see the hardships that children who were sweeps in the Victorian era went through, and how they would literally climb up chimneys because they were small enough to get up chimneys. And so it made me think totally differently about the brush that Bert carries around in Mary Poppins. Like, oh, wow, that brush is, you know, why children weren't having to climb up chimneys anymore. So it was a really enjoyable read and really had a lot of heart to it. So I highly recommend that. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. Then I've been going through the Henry Huggins books, doing the audio with Peter, and we're really enjoying those. So we read the first one, which is called Henry Huggins. These are written by Beverly Cleary, and they're about this little boy named Henry. And then she also has a series featuring Beezus and Ramona, and then in some of them they intertwine. I don't really enjoy Ramona all that much because as a grown-up, I just see how irritating she is. So I actually prefer the Henry books so far. I haven't enjoyed my time with Ramona much. And then I read The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. And I really liked this. It was a middle grade puzzle mystery. And so I can go kind of back and forth over puzzle mysteries. Sometimes they seem there's not enough character development, but this one kept busy enough. It was very fast paced that I really enjoyed it. And I highly recommend it. Then I read Pax by Sara Pennypacker. This is the story of a boy and his beloved fox Pax and their separation and then their journey to try to find each other again. This was a little bit too heartbreaking for me. There was, you know, it just felt a little bit too distant and lonely that I didn't get to know the characters. And then the ending, I didn't think really rang true. So unfortunately, this wasn't really a success with me. So yeah, You win some, you lose some. Then another one for middle grade March that I really did enjoy is Our Only May Amelia. This is a Newbery winner. It's by Jennifer Holm, and it's sort of pioneers in Oregon, and they're Swedish immigrants. And I really liked getting to see kind of the experience at this time in America of these people. And it was really interesting learning about their day-to-day life. And there were some funny anecdotes. I really liked the character of May Amelia. It's not often actually that I identify with characters in books, but I really identified with her because she was getting into trouble a lot, which I did as a child. And she was a tomboy, which I was as a child. And so it was just really fun. I liked it. I was very charmed by it. And it had some fun illustrations in it as well. Then for my Victorian book club that I host, I read Dr. Wortle's School by Anthony Trollope. And it brought me out of my Victorian literature slump that I was in. I'd read several sensation novels in a row that I hadn't enjoyed. And I really enjoyed this. It was just a very simple and sweet standalone novel by Anthony Trollope about this couple who, through different circumstances, or wait, I don't want to give spoilers. So there's a couple with a secret and they work at the school and their secret comes out and they have to decide what to do about it. So I really enjoyed it. It was just, like I said, a short and sweet Anthony Trollope. Let me see how many pages it was. Little over 200 pages. So, and I really liked it. I thought it was very fun. Next, let's see, was the second in the Henry Huggins series, Henry and Beezus. So I really like this series and I'm really enjoying going through those books. I went through them as a kid, so it's fun to revisit them. Next book that I read is Dead End in Norvelt by Jack Yantos. I really enjoyed this book. It's not in my typical wheelhouse, but I was won over by it. It was really quirky, but it was laugh out loud funny. I really liked it. It's semi-autobiographical, and it's just about this little boy, Jack, who lives in a small town of Norvelt, and there's a sort of mystery going on, but it really is kind of on the back burner for a while, and just his interactions with the different quirky and funny neighbors, and I just really was won over by it. I highly recommend it. Next is Service of All the Dead by Colin Dexter. This is the fourth in the Inspector Morse series, and this was an excellent, excellent mystery. It had me guessing until the end, and I still didn't get it right. And they are just such well-written detective fiction. So I definitely recommend that. Then another great mystery that I read was Dissolution, the first in the Matthew Shardlake mysteries by C.J. Sansom. And I read this for Mel and Victoria's Reading Through the Ages project for the Tudor era England, and they both loved this series. And this series had so much that I want out of a historical mystery series. So a really interesting setting, excellent writing, fast-moving, pacey plot, and interesting characters that you get to know. And it had all of that, and so I was blown away by it, and currently am reading the second, which is called Dark Fire. And so I'm really excited to continue on with that. Then the book that is now my favorite Kate DiCamillo was Flora and Ulysses, The Illuminated Adventures. This is a really spectacularly crafted book in that it has little bits of comic book in it and it has a fair number of illustrations. So it made for a really wonderful read aloud with Peter. We both really enjoyed it. He didn't want me to finish it in the end. He loved it so much. And it's about this little girl named Flora who happens to find this squirrel one day named Ulysses, or she names the squirrel Ulysses. And sort of that sets off a chain of events for Flora, whose parents are on the outs and don't have a lot of things resolved. And it was just a really enjoyable read. And I'm so glad that I picked it up. And it's definitely my favorite by Kate DiCamillo. Then a sort of disappointing book was Magic for Marigold by Ellen Montgomery. If this were a different author, I don't know if I would say it was a disappointing book. It's Ellen Montgomery. And I know she has books that I have adored, like Anne of Green Gables and Jane of Lantern Hill and The Blue Castle. But since I have those expectations, then for this to be a kind of average book, I feel very disappointed, but it was 3 stars. And my issue with this was not Marigold. I loved her so much. She's one of my favorite characters that Ellen Montgomery has written, but it's that you spend so much time with other characters who are really unpleasant to be around that I just wanted so much more time with Marigold, and I didn't want to be spending time with those characters. So that was my main issue with the book. Then a book I read called Clementine by Sara Pennypacker. This is a really short and sweet chapter book about a little girl called Clementine who gets into lots of trouble, but she's very precocious, and she's just endearing. She's very endearing, and it was a really short and sweet chapter book. Next is the second in the All of a Kind family series, All of a Kind Family Downtown. And this, Charlie is the newest kid in the family. He's a little toddler, and he's the only boy in the family. And I really, really like this one. This might be my favorite thus far. The kids are a little bit older, and just the different adventures that they have in this one, I really enjoyed. Next is Heart of a Samurai by Margie Pruce. And this is a book, a middle grade book, another one for middle grade March, about the first Japanese immigrant to America. And it was when Japan had closed doors. And so it was really interesting to see. And just a nice, short and sweet little historical fiction to read. It won the Newbery. I don't know if I said that. It had really nice illustrations at certain points in it, and I really liked it. Then next, another mystery that I read for Reading Through the Ages for India during the Raj era, and that is The Widows of Malabar Hill. This is the first in the Perveen mystery series, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's a woman who is a lawyer in, is it 1927, I want to say? 1921. And just kind of the obstacles that she has to overcome just to investigate a mystery, just to investigate a murder, and see what's happened. So I really liked that. Next was The Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Patterson. Read this for middle grade March, and unfortunately this is one that I just did not like that much. So I don't know if this will communicate, but basically I thought the family was so unappealing. They were so mean to each other, and it was like there was no love there. They reminded me of the family in E.T. That family has always depressed me so much. There's so much bickering, and they just seem like they hate each other. And so the actual big storyline of Bridge to Terabithia did connect with me emotionally, but the family were so awful that it just really put a bad taste in my mouth for this book, unfortunately. A book that I really loved that I read for middle grade March was Caddy Woodlawn. And Caddy Woodlawn, it won a Newbery. And this is set, it's pioneer era. I'm trying to remember what state it's, Wisconsin, yes. And she's a redhead. There are so many good redheads in literature. And I was just so won over by this story. She was fun, she was feisty, she was brave, and I just thought a really great girl to look up to if you're looking for books for your children to read with characters you want them to embody. I think she's a fabulous one, and it was just very well written and engaging, and it was just a fabulous children's book. Then, followed by another fabulous children's book, was Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This one did, in fact, live up to the hype for me. I loved it so much. I think this first go-round, I enjoyed it as much as Harry Potter. I don't know if that will be the case for a reread, because it might just be kind of the wonder of a new world. But the first go-round, I definitely did. And the only thing that I felt was lacking was I felt I didn't get to know the characters as well as I had wanted. That being said, however, I wonder, going back, if I could remember when reading Harry Potter for the first time, maybe I felt that way after the first book. So I'm totally giving it the benefit of the doubt. I listened to the audiobook for the most part because the narration was so wonderful. And I have only not read Wondersmith yet because I've been waiting in line for the audiobook of Wondersmith because it was just such a great experience and I want to experience it via audiobook. Then a really touching book that I really enjoyed is Cheaper by the Dozen by Frank B. Gilbreth Jr. This is about the Gilbreth family and the main character really is their father, and everything that he did to kind of give his kids a leg forward, to teach them just to be really good human beings who are contributing members of society. He would have kind of driven me crazy as a father because he was an efficiency expert, and he also kind of tut-tutted about novel reading. So I'm like, oh, I don't know how I would have felt about you as a father. But that being said, reading about him in the book, I really enjoyed. And they were just a really special family. And you know what? If you have 12 kids, you're going to have to be kind of obsessive about efficiency. Like he did different things, like he showed them precisely how they should lather soap on their bodies in the shower to be the most efficient. He also put on foreign language records while they were in the shower so they could not only get cleaned up, but learn a foreign language at the same time. And it just had a lot of amusing anecdotes. And then at the end, I was really moved to tears. So this was definitely a positive reading experience, and I highly recommend it. Next is Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. This is a novel in, it's poetry, but it's very short, kind of choppy poems. And I listened to the audiobook, which is read by the author. This was such a moving, beautiful, sweeping poetry collection. I was really moved by it. I felt just really honored to listen to it. It was really interesting to hear about her experiences as a child, and I definitely recommend it. It was just a really moving collection of poetry. Next is Mr. Popper's Penguins by Richard Atwater. And this is a really charming book about a man who is Mr. Popper and is a house painter. And he gets sent a penguin, and then when that by an Arctic explorer. And then when that penguin is lonely, he gets sent a girl penguin to go with him. And then they have 10 baby penguins who kind of take over his house. It's a really charming, larger than life kind of children's book, and I really liked it. Next is Elegy for Eddie. This is the 9th in the Maisie Dobbs series. I really liked this one. It was especially heartbreaking. You can see things are really moving forward with tensions, heading towards World War II. So it was a really hard read. The Maisie Dobbs books, have this ache about them, but it's totally appropriate. So I really like this series, and this involved someone with special needs who was involved in the murder case. And it was just really sobering, this case. So I definitely recommend this series. Next, a book that I was kind of meh about was The Royal Rabbits of London by Santa Montefiore. And this one, it was just too silly for me. I don't know if that sounds kind of snooty to say, but at the end of the day, that's how I felt. It was too silly. It had a lot of potty humor, which I think children's books can just be so much better than that without potty humor. So I will not be rereading it. Next is the 3rd in the Lady Emily series, A Fatal Waltz, and this took place a lot of it in Vienna, which was a fabulous setting. I did not know about, Vienna and the Victorian era, and it was a really great way to get a taste of what it was like. I read this with Kate from the novel Nomad. We love this series. We can't wait to get on to the next one. And Colin is in this one. He's Lady Emily's romantic interest, and so it was really neat to see their relationship progress. Then is Amethyst Dreams by Phyllis Whitney. Phyllis Whitney was an author that I said I wanted to read this year, and this was kind of different than I was expecting it to be, in that it was a lot of inner dialogue and so much psychology and a little bit less plot. But it was written in such a way that it really had me hooked from the beginning. I could not put this down. I really enjoyed it. This one, let me look up the characters' names, because like I say, this is a little while ago that I read it, in April 19th. Hallie Knight, that's what it is, Hallie. And she has a friend that she knew a while ago, and this friend is from Topsail Island. So it's fun because Phyllis Whitney has been kind of compared to Mary Stuart, but Mary Stuarts are all in other countries that I haven't been to. And I have been to North Carolina, but not to Topsail Island. Anyhow, this friend went missing several years ago. And so her grandfather asks Hallie to come and investigate what happened to her. And so she gets to know all of the people that she knew and investigate where is this friend. So I definitely highly recommend it. I cannot wait to read more Phyllis Whitney. I really liked the narrator of this. It's rare that I will, I'm really picky about American narrators, and I really liked this one. So I am looking forward to reading much, much more Phyllis Whitney. Then 3-Act Tragedy, the 11th in the Hercule Poirot series. I gave this 4 stars. I really liked this one simply because I just found the motives of the killer in this one very interesting, and just the way it was investigated, I was really on the edge of my seat. So that was favorite one now in the Hercule Poirot series. Then the 3rd in the All of a Kind family series, more All of a Kind family. Still enjoying this series. They're getting older in this one. And yeah, it's just a great, great series. Then the March and April picks, is that right? Yeah, March and April picks for Betsy Tacy 2019 were Heaven to Betsy and Betsy in Spite of Herself. I love this series so stinking much. So I did individual reviews for those books. So if you'd like to hear more about that, then you can hear more about those. They're the high school years for Betsy. Then Robin and I read The Shadowy Horses by Susanna Kearsley. This has a storyline that goes back to Roman Europe, which I found really fascinating. Not something that I've explored much, and really liked the romance in this one as well. I just love Susanna Kearsley. I love how she writes. I just love her books so much. Then I will be going through a fair number of Jean Stratton Porter books, which I showed one of them in the beginning of my May reading vlog. And I'll be going through them with Elena, who's a lovely subscriber. And so we read Freckles, and Freckles is the story of this Irish boy who is out of work, and he ends up getting hired to be sort of this protector of the Limberlost and of different lumber that they want guarded and, not taken down. And as far as plot goes, it was very interesting. As far as writing goes, it was like middling. And as far as character development goes, it was not that great. But I did go in knowing this was one of Jean Stratton Porter's earliest books. I think her second book she'd ever written. So I wasn't that disappointed to not love it. Yeah, I wasn't that disappointed. I think it got 3 stars. It was like 2.5 or 3 stars. Then a buddy read with Kate from the novel Nomad was A Stranger in Mayfair by Charles Finch. This is the 4th in the Charles Lennox mysteries. I really like these. This one didn't engage me quite as much as the previous ones, and I honestly can't tell you whether it's kind of the reading mood that I was in, or whether it's other stuff that was going on, or whether it was the book. I don't know. It got 3 stars from me, so not too shabby. And then next, I finally finished Winter's Heart by Robert Jordan, the 9th in the Wheel of Time series. I'm so happy Doris has joined me in this project, and it was really I was kind of loitering in it for a while, and I hadn't picked up one, but I've really been spurred on by Doris doing it. So we're planning on picking up the 10th one in July. And next is The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. This is the first in Anthony Horowitz's detective series. And I was kind of skeptical about the idea of this series. And Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures, I remember saying she was too, but the execution is done really well. So Anthony Horowitz writes himself into the story as a writer who gets to know this detective. Hawthorne, that's what it is. And so kind of writes about writing the book while it's happening. It's very different, but Anthony Horowitz just knows the world of mysteries and telling stories. He's written lots of episodes for Foyle's War and Midsummer Murders, and he just knows how to do it well. And so I really enjoyed this. And the premise sounds really interesting, where there was a woman who went in to plan her funeral and then died the same day after she had left that place. And what happened there? So I definitely recommend that. Then the 4th in the All of a Kind family series, All of a Kind Family Uptown. And this is branching on to World War I happening. So it does get really sad and serious because there's characters that you know in this that end up enlisting. And yeah, it's a really hard time in the world, but I like that when historical fiction, even for children, won't skirt around that. And then one of the highlights of my reading year is The Seven Sisters by Lucinda Riley. This was recommended to me by a lovely, lovely subscriber. I will be eternally grateful. And this is a series that there are 6 sisters. The 7th is a mystery. They don't know where she is. And they, each book, the series starts out where their father has passed away. And then each book is going to be a story of one sister in a different country, and then you find out kind of it's a dual narrative, hearing about one of her ancestors and their kind of stories. So in this first one, you get to follow the sister Maya, and she travels to Rio de Janeiro and she learns about this great grandmother of hers. It was just written in such a compelling way, and I just love how character focused it is. I'm so excited about this series, and I love the next one takes place in Norway. I absolutely can't wait to get my hands on it. I've made, other reading priorities, so I haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm so excited about these books. Then Henry and Ribsy, the third in the Henry Huggins series. Really enjoyed this one. These are steady 3-star reads for me. Then Elena and I read A Girl of the Limberlost by Jean Stratton Porter, and we really enjoyed this. The writing, like I said in the reading vlog, it's not quite as flowery as I wanted it to be. That being said, Elnora is such a fabulous, fabulous female lead. She has agency, but she can be vulnerable too. She has this really great interest that she's so passionate about, wildlife and moths and butterflies. And she's hardworking, and she's interesting. And I just really love the character of Elnora. So that's what really made the story for me. The writing's a little bit plainer than I like. But like I said, Elnora just really made the story for me. Okay, I'm getting so worn out. I only have 2 left though. One is The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. And I read this for my Victorian Literature Book Club. I did not enjoy this reading experience. It was, the writing was really beautiful, but I was so bored. And I'm not saying it's not an important book. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. It was just not a Kate book at all. It was so incredibly plot-based and not very character-based. So I read it. I can say that I read it, and now I'm done. Then a highlight of my reading year, one of my favorite books of all time now, and I just finished it, and that is The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy. Good grief. I did not know how much I was going to love this book before going in. I read this with Adam from Memento Mori, Natalie from My Reading Days, and Kate from the novel Nomad, and it was so fun. These people are just so fun to buddy read with. I got so much more out of this book than I would have otherwise, had I just read it on my own. And we just had the most interesting and thought-provoking discussions. So this book, The Return of the Native, kind of compares and contrasts several different characters and their connection to Egdon Heath, where they're living, and their dreams and aspirations, and kind of what they'll do to obtain those dreams and aspirations. This book had such atmosphere to it. It had like all of the beautiful lyrical writing of Far From the Madding Crowd and all of the pacey plotting of The Mayor of Casterbridge, and then combine them together and you have The Return of the Native. This book is seriously as if Emily Bronte and Thomas Hardy had a book baby. I don't know if everybody else in the group was on board with that, but I say it was, because I did think it had a gothic atmosphere, and just the way the characters were relating to one another, and this tragical atmosphere to it. It's not a happy book, but it's so moving, and it's going to stay with me. It's such an amazing book. It's my favorite Thomas Hardy now, and I can't talk highly about it enough. So I'm really happy to, like I said, I was in a Victorian reading slump. And so, you know, to have several books, oh no, I do like Victorian literature, just not all of it. And so just to be okay, DNFing some books, you can't like everything, you know? So yes, I really love that, in case you couldn't tell. This has gone on long enough. I have now wrapped up over 50 books, and I will be back for another video sometime soon.